the handlers, if there's people pulling all these strings, they have realized that like Trudeau has outlived his usefulness and told him he's got to go because he wasn't going to do it on his own. The guy is a vainglorious narcissist douchebag, right? He just, look at the way he operates. Like, just see any video of him. He's just constantly smirking, no clue about what he's doing or the effects he has on people, no concept of accountability. He immediately went back on his pledge in 2015 to have the most open and transparent government in Canadian history. Oh, okay, sure, dude.
The elusive Gord Magill, back again. My brother, I have been chasing you for months. I'm like, Gord, when the fuck are we going to do this? When are we going to talk to each other again? You and I speak privately fairly often, and I'm like, Gord, come on, man. But I know you're busy, so I'm happy to have you, brother. How are you doing?
I'm well. Yeah, we're all busy, and we're all scrambling these days. Way she goes, Bubs.
Yeah, dude. Listen, first and foremost, I just want to say you have replaced a long list of writers on my list as favorite writers. People listening to this, pause it, go to the Autonomous Truckers Substack. I'm not as active on Substack.
You're making me blush. You're making me blush, man.
Dude, you are a fucking unicorn, bro. Like, you are a different breed. Like, I read your shit and I'm like, oh my God. Like, I gotta read a dictionary and brush up on the way I string my thoughts together, man, because I'm falling way behind this guy.
You're no slouch yourself, sir.
Well, thank you, sir. So we are recording this on January 6th, a hallowed day in the United States and now a hallowed day in Canada.
Yeah.
We have managed to sync up. Well, an hour ago, Justin Trudeau announced his intention to resign as Liberal leader, which I think intent is the key word because who knows what that means. But what are your initial thoughts on all of this?
Oh, man. Well, fortuitous timing with the January 6th thing, given how Prime Minister Trudeau and his advisors and so many bureaucrats and functionaries of his regime attempted to meme January 6th North into reality on the backs of the largest peaceful protest in Canadian history. So, in little ways, God is smiling upon us with the choice of date. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. But so my knee-jerk reaction, I wrote a post on X basically saying, and he's gone. And Justin Trudeau resigns. There's much more to be said about this, but I, like many other Canadians, am going to take a deep breath before I write anything down. And of course, the comments are filling up with, he's not gone. He's just prorogued Parliament. So can you, Gord, I know you know a bit about this stuff. So what does prorogation mean in the Canadian context?
Oh, man, I wish I was as much of a scholar on the minutiae of parliamentary procedures as you wish me to be. But basically, it just means it gets put on hold. He asks the Governor General, who is the King's representative in Canada, and I guess under the rules, it's something the Prime Minister can do. Harper did it once, I recall. I can't remember what for. A lot of people like to, wish that we were back under the leadership of Stephen Harper. And I'm like, why? He brought in the Canadian version of the Patriot Act and did all kinds of nasty stuff. Like, I don't, obviously, Trudeau as a person is like completely and utterly loathsome, and there's no real meeting the depths to which he exists. But like, I don't know that like Harper's all that much better. But anyway, yeah, prorogation, it just means Parliament's on hold. I heard an interesting thing on a Twitter video this morning from Brian Lilly, who's a columnist with the Toronto Sun, talking about how the government is financed, and they have to, I don't believe it's a spending bill. There's some other kind of spending mechanism that's due, I believe, by the end of March. So Trudeau chose to pause things until the absolute last minute that they have to get back inside for business, lest the government run out of money or funding. So he basically pushed it out as far as he can. So, think on that what you will.
Yeah. So my thoughts on this is a lot of online commentators wanted an immediate dissolution of parliament, which would trigger a snap election, but as much as I would like that to happen, as much as I would like to see it, the Liberal Party needs time to find a new leader, and we already know who that's going to be. Mark Carney's coming in. He is infinitely worse than Justin Trudeau. I mean, to a whole other level. And this is a guy that comes from the banking world. He's a finance guy. He understands how the climate change hoax works, and he's going to be far more balls to the wall on this than Justin Trudeau could ever dream to be, because Trudeau doesn't harbor the intellect to properly follow the agenda that is unfolding in front of us. And so we know Mark Carney, what he's trying to do essentially is buy time for the Liberals to find a new leader who will be Mark Carney, which I'm not exact. See, I'm confused. The parliamentary system confuses the shit out of me too, man. Half the time I'm like, I have no fucking idea what's going on. Right. And what we've just experienced for the last 4 years, actually, I think is a great argument for leaving the parliamentary system and moving over to a Republican system, similar to what the United States has, because we got locked into a coalition government that we did not vote for, that we did not want. And, we were basically held hostage for the better part of 4 years. And so he's putting Parliament on hold so that the Liberals can elect a new leader. Meanwhile, we have these tariffs incoming from Trump, right? As of January 20th, we were looking at a 25% tariff on all of our exports. So we are looking at least a minimum of 2 to 3 months of serious economic pain in Canada. Now, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, like, how do Trump's tariffs affect just Canadian life in general?
Right. Let me start back with Carney. I'm as well confused, maybe less so about the parliamentary system than the sort of court machinations going on here. You're right. Carney has much deeper knowledge and level of experience about how the world works, and he's had some pretty major positions. I think he was the governor of the Bank of Canada and the governor of the Bank of England.
Yeah.
This guy's a bankster and a corporatist through and through, a central player in what you might call the machine. The thing that confuses me is why Carney would step down to become the prime minister, because it is a step down. And, the Liberal Party of Canada are a sinking ship. May all the rats on board drown. But, why would he do that? Like, there isn't a universe where the Liberal Party can turn it around by October if they run it out till the end of the clock. I don't understand how they can do that. And I don't understand why Carney thinks he can pull it off. Like, whatever, maybe I'll put on my tinfoil hat. Maybe they know there's some more stuff coming down the pipe that we are not privy to. It's just a guy like Carney who could make billions, being a functionary at some other level in a different part of the world, at some corporation. He could be sitting on boards. Like the prime minister's salary is like peanuts compared to what that guy's made in his life. Like, I don't get it. Like, somebody else has to figure this out.
And I don't either. And, putting on my tinfoil hat, I suspect that Mark Carney is being installed. I don't think him being prime minister is attractive to him. I don't think the prime minister's salary, as you just eloquently outlined, is even remotely attractive to him. What I think is that Mark Carney serves a much bigger body. And I've long held this theory that Chrystia Freeland was installed by these same people, because there was absolutely no reason for her to be where she was. She was not qualified to be a deputy prime minister, nor was she qualified to be a finance minister. However, she was. And she did all of Trudeau's dirty work for him. She was his number one henchman for, the better part of 5 years, 6 years. And so what I think, and again, this is tinfoil hat stuff, but, if you look into the climate change conspiracy, and I call it a conspiracy because that's exactly what it is, and you go all the way to the root of it, a lot of this stuff is coming out of China, who also happens to be the world's biggest polluter, right? But a lot of this policy is coming out of China, and China is very much plugged into these globalist organizations like the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and others, right? And so what I think is that Carney is being installed to do the bidding of some very dangerous, highly corrupt and evil people. That's what I think. That's my personal belief, because I agree with you. Not only that, but a lot of people have brought up the fact that, well, Carney can't be elected Liberal leader because he's never won a riding. He has to win a riding somewhere first in order. But it looks like there are loopholes that are going to allow him to leapfrog that process if he's appointed by Justin Trudeau. Again, I don't understand the parliamentary process completely, so I don't know how it totally works. But in my view, it looks like this guy is being installed.
That's definitely a possibility. And, stranger things have happened. Yeah, Freeland is a special case. Her, specialty, such as she was any good at it, which I doubt, was journalism. I'd never even heard of her before she became the deputy PM. Carney, again, I don't know. That's all pure speculation. The guy is, a part of the machine. The Chinese component to this is interesting because, yes, CSIS has shown that they have been involved in interfering in at least 2 elections and other parts of our politics back to at least the Mulroney administration. And, Canada's like such a small place, right? Like even now, only 40 million people, small player, economy based on, or at least it used to be based on resource extraction. And we get interfered with by China. We get interfered with by the Americans. I mean, one of the things that we're all, happy about Trudeau leaving was his handling of the Freedom Convoy. Let us not forget that, him and Freeland were in pretty serious meetings with Biden and Pete Buttigieg about the border crossing components to the various Freedom Convoy protests. And, there was a famous meeting that Trudeau had with Biden, I think on the phone, where he said, I have a plan to deal with this. I've got it. Right. And, and then there's all the documentation between Buttigieg and his people and Freeland and her people that was revealed during POEC. And then, I think it was a subdivision of the Department of Homeland Security or FBI. I can't remember oh man, it got canceled and folded into the FBI and the name escapes me, but they were conspiring, having meetings with one another about talking to the social media companies to censor and otherwise quash social media accounts associated with the Freedom Convoy while it was still ongoing. And, our Twitter mutual Buck McYoung has put out thread after thread after thread of all these documents that he's got from FOIA and FOIPOP requests, just showing that, the American government, the sort of foreign policy establishment, or the blob, as some people call it in the U.S., they're balls deep in Canada, man. This is not just a China thing. And, it's hard to sort of make sense of all these different factors. But I mean, clearly, the handlers, if there's people pulling all these strings, they have realized that Trudeau has outlived his usefulness and told him he's got to go, because he wasn't going to do it on his own. The guy is a vainglorious narcissist douchebag, right? He just, look at the way he operates. Just see any video of him. He's just constantly smirking, no clue about what he's doing or the effects he has on people, no concept of accountability. He immediately went back on his, his pledge in 2015 to have the most open and transparent government in Canadian history. Oh, okay, sure, dude. How many 17,000 documents related to the investigations into the Freedom Convoy on the part of the government are still considered classified. 700 or 800 of them are top secret. Why on earth is there 800 top secret documents related to a peaceful protest where nobody got hurt and no property was damaged except at the hands of the police?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was about to add that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm so glad these guys are I'm glad he's gone. I'm bummed that I'm just bummed we didn't get to vote for it. I'm bummed that an election didn't get called. I'm bummed that Jagmeet Singh's propped him up this long and voted against the confidence motions. I mean, we know why he did that, the various reasons why. But you know, Canadians aren't getting to fire Justin Trudeau. Like we talk about Donald Trump, you're fired. We don't get to fire Donald or Justin Trudeau. He's just quitting. He's just going to leave. He's never going to face any accountability. And I think I read somewhere like his net worth is like $400 million or something. Like he's probably going to end up having to leave Canada. There was a newspaper article I read a couple of years ago. I can't remember where I saw it, the Ottawa Citizen or maybe the Hamilton Spectator or something like that, that indicated that Trudeau is going to be the first prime minister in Canadian history where they are assuming he has to have security detail for the rest of his days, kind of like what the Secret Service provides to former presidents in the United States. That's not something that's ever happened in Canada, and it looks like Trudeau is going to be the first. And I mean, you can see why.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, I don't see a scenario where he can walk around as a civilian ever again. I mean, certainly not in Canada, but I would imagine anywhere else he goes as well. He'll have to live in a gated, a community for elites where only people like him exist. That's the big consequence for him. And I don't think a lot of Canadians or even spectators around the world, since Canada has become a center of focus, political focus, I don't think they understand like the consequence for Trudeau, although us as Canadians have had to experience the suffering and the pain for the last 9 years of his rule. His life is ruined. It's over. He's never going to be able to move freely through the world ever again, because no matter where he goes, he's going to be viewed as a tin pot junior dictator, a complete and utter failure, an egomaniac and a narcissist. He's repugnant to normal, everyday, average people. And so he's not getting away with anything. And I agree with you. I would have loved to have seen him defeated in an election, but this is a nice consolation because in this way he's defeated himself. The weasels in his party have defeated him.
Right. I mean, yeah, he's going to be living in a WEF sponsored gilded cage. He'll be nominated to some symbolic position within one of these like transnational, globalist money laundering operations that tries to peddle influence and mess with sovereign nation states. And he'll get paid handsomely for it. And he's going to keep flying around and keep blowing carbon into the atmosphere that he claims to worship at their expense. And we're never going to get the sort of accountability we need. But, it is a cage. You're right. Like, he's never going to be able to go anywhere without security. And he's never going to be able to have a normal life as anybody else understands it. And I mean, I think we're going to have to get cozy with that. And just that's probably all we're ever going to see, unfortunately.
He'll disappear because his public profile is destroyed, right? I mean, had he have left a year ago, or had China not have interfered in our election in 2021, which they absolutely did, had he had lost that election, he would have more than likely enjoyed some form of adulation from elite circles and, left-wing Canadian media for some time, right? But like even today, I'm listening to this, to the talking heads on CTV after the press conference where he announced his resignation, and the invective coming from them. I don't know if it's just that it's okay now for them to say it, right? If they've been giving their marching orders and the gloves are off and now it's time to destroy Trudeau and build up Mark Carney or whoever the Liberals select, which I can almost guarantee is going to be Mark Carney. But he is now at this point where he is so despised, not just within Canada, but on a global scale, that I think for somebody like him, who is so clearly a sociopathic narcissist, that is the worst outcome that could possibly happen to him. Because if he lost an election, all right, whatever, right? Canadians voted against him. He's no longer the prime minister. But in this way, he was put in a corner where he had to fall on his sword. He was forced to walk away, forced to resign. And for a guy like him, that's the worst thing that could happen is tapping out and quitting publicly in front of with the whole world watching, right?
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, to him, that's the worst way to go. I think I can speak on behalf of a certain number of our countrymen that we would have rather voted him out, because that could have been like a symbolic gesture, like, hey, like I said before, you're fired.
Yeah.
To get back to Trudeau and those tariffs, or Donald Trump and those tariffs, Trudeau, Trump, TRU. Oh man. Yeah, I think when Trump announced those tariffs originally, I believe, like, when you look at the way Trump operates, okay, whether you agree with him or not, this is not like a pro or con thing about Trump himself or how he operates. It just is what it is. He negotiates by his juvenile online shenanigans, right? Like, that's how he does things. That's how he gets things done. And you sort of have to. We've been watching the guy now since 2015 when he first showed up on the scene. Like, if people haven't figured this out yet, like, I'm sorry, you're not paying attention. So I think that the tariff thing was basically a negotiating, a start to negotiations. Like, Trump has a number of concerns with Canada. He goes off about like subsidizing us, but what he actually means is that he's subsidizing our military. Like, Canada has always been protected by living next door to the United States and by the Arctic and by the two oceans, right? Who's doing the heavy lifting on most of that with regards to like naval patrolling and radar and Air Force and all that? The United States. The United States picks up the tab for most of the world. And, Trump's been, critical of NATO and critical of European countries. It's the same thing. So he thinks we're riding on America's coattails. He's also worried about the Chinese Communist Party influence. Like, the average American probably has no idea about that because they don't pay too much attention to Canadian news unless they're junkies like us. But like, Trump's people know what's going on. They're not stupid. And they don't want that. They're not interested in having the Communist Party of China have a toehold with the neighbors. They're just not. And you see this with their rhetoric towards Mexico as well. It's not all just economics. A lot of this stuff is sort of like, larger, grander strategy. And then as far as Trump's, sort of populist concerns, like many Americans, he's watched the fentanyl crisis and opioids and the epidemic in the United States, and he doesn't want no part of that, and his voters don't want no part of that. And then you watch the news, biggest fentanyl drug bust in Canadian history here a couple months ago in BC. Chinese triads have been operating in Vancouver since forever. The Indians are in on it. I pay a lot of attention to trucking media because that's kind of my beat. And there's been probably half a dozen Canadian truck drivers busted either at the border or in the United States smuggling drugs, right? Every single one of those truck drivers was an Indian. I'm sorry, I'm not calling them an Indian Canadian. They probably only showed up here yesterday. And who's in charge of this, right? So, like, Trump sees all this, his people see all this, and they're like, enough is enough. So what does he do? He gets on Twitter and Truth and starts making fun of Trudeau and 51st State and calling him the governor. It's like, he sort of understands that, like, Trudeau's days were numbered, so he can, like, make fun of him at will. Like, what's Trudeau going to do about it? But it's a signal. It's a signal to the Canadian government, to any adults in it, to start governing like adults and engage in a relationship with the United States that addresses our mutual concerns, right?
Yeah.
And like, Trump can see that, like, the Liberal Party and the government as constituted under Trudeau are, for lack of a better word, they're just like a bunch of incompetent, malignant nincompoops that don't know what they're doing. And Trump and his people realize that that's sort of a threat to the priorities of the American people. So he's like, that's it. Enough's enough. Time to start trolling.
Yeah, I've always kind of compared it to what Trudeau and his administration remind me of is basically if you allowed the popular group in high school to take over a country. And that's essentially what we've seen.
Yeah, and other people call them the theater kids, right? That's a sort of online meme. You know,
Right.
yeah, our country's run by theater kids, all these sort of, at the NGO Foundation, nonprofit industrial complex, and these outfits like the WEF getting up in everybody's business. They're all theater kids too. I mean, they're smart theater kids. They're getting away with it. It's just a matter of, how does the nation state in the 21st century reassert itself, reassert its sovereignty, and tell all of these transnational pukes to get lost? I wonder where the left is on that, because, when I grew up, Battle of Seattle, the big protest in Quebec City,
Yeah.
everyone protesting against the Second Iraq War. Like, back then, the left, in quotation marks, and, big picture left, was against all this stuff, and now they're for it. What happened? I think we have to start asking our friends over there to get off the identity politics crack pipe and rediscover their sort of labor and labor nationalist roots. Bernie Sanders put out a tweet the other day talking about this H-1B visa issue here in the United States, and saying, Elon Musk and all these other folks are right. These visas are exploitative, and companies use them not necessarily always to attract the best and brightest to America, but as an excuse to underpay those people at the expense of Americans and American talent and workers. And Sanders was right. And in the aftermath of that tweet, every single dog shit Democratic operative and leftoid influencer on Twitter was engaged in a pile-on against Sanders. Again, I have to ask my friends on the left, what happened to you guys? What happened to supporting your fellow working class people? What happened to concern about where you live? When did you all become corporate lackeys? What happened to these guys? And I guess we can segue to the sort of piece I wrote here on Substack last week.
Let's
invited me back on.
Yeah, dude, I've been inviting you for months. Stop it. I've been fucking reaching out to you for months, buddy, and I'm not cutting that out. I'm leaving that in so everybody knows. No. I've been chasing you forever. I've been every fucking couple of weeks. I'm like, Gord. I've started to feel like I was hassling you, man.
Not at all, brother.
I want to talk about the trucking aspect, because you raised a really good point, man. So I've done, over the last year, I've recorded about 14 episodes with Sam Cooper, and they've
been fantastic. I've watched a few of them. They've been really good.
Thank you, brother. Yes, I have jumped right into the deep end with him. I feel like I have such a better grasp on what's actually happening in our country through Sam Cooper than I did before. And so Vancouver is a main port of entry into North America. And it seems like Chinese organized crime, as an extension of the CCP, control the ports in Vancouver, control much of the transportation, control much of the distribution of fentanyl, I would say almost all of it, in our country. And that's what Trump is eyeing. That's what he's singled in on.
That's one of his concerns, yeah.
Yeah, and I think rightfully so. I mean, they've identified the problem. They know what the problem is. Now, it just so happens that a lot of the people who are making billions of dollars off the sale and distribution of fentanyl also happen to be donors to the Liberal Party. So you see how that all works, right? Now, from a trucking aspect, right? Because trucking is a major part of, it is the form of distribution for goods across our country and into the United States. So in terms of the fentanyl moving across our country and across the border into the United States, can you give a little bit more detail on that? These trucking companies that are involved and the groups of people involved.
Right. So it's good that you brought up ports. This might not be an exact answer, but it'll give you a path to figuring it out. I don't want to claim to know all the answers specifically to the fentanyl stuff, but these things overlap. As far as the use of immigrant communities and recent arrivals in trucking goes, typically in the history of trucking, they get into certain niche markets within trucking, right? So when I was a young guy getting into the business when I was a teenager, the sort of the Punjabi community's participation in trucking in Canada goes back quite a long ways. It's not recent. It's just expanded exponentially very recently. They were basically hauling cans, a lot of them. They hauled containers and they hauled gravel. They got into those two markets because, hauling containers, you hook up to a can chassis, show up at the port, they drop a box on, take it away, bring another box in. It sort of doesn't, it doesn't require tons of skill to be a container hauler. And, and that's less of the problem than the fact it pays terrible, right? The international shipping companies have been crapping on what they call drayage truckers. Drayage is the sort of industry term for containers on and off the ports. And it's the same all around the world. It's the same in the United States. It doesn't pay that well. It's never paid that well. And they try and shave their costs there first. So, you're a recent arrival from the Punjab or whatever country, it's really easy to get a license. Okay, cool. Let's go trucking. You might as well start at the bottom, and that's hauling cans. So it's no surprise to me that, various criminal organizations that might be associated either with the CCP or their controlled triads and associated or affiliated groups or groups in the same industry from India. I mean, most of the cans coming on and off the port in Vancouver, I bet you dollars to donuts, 9 out of 10 or more of the moves off those ports are being made by Punjabi truck drivers. And it's the same in Toronto. The Toronto can market, the guys that go back and forth to Port of New York and New Jersey or Montreal, that's typically that's Punjabi truckers or guys from Eastern Europe. There's a couple of container companies around Toronto that are owned by people from Poland or Romania or what have you. So that it should be no surprise that they're involved in that. As far as the other stuff, I'm still not 100% sure why it is that the Indian sort of freight companies are so overrepresented in all these drug busts lately. I really don't know, and I'm not going to pretend to know why, but there's been quite a few of them, and it's always these young Indian guys. I don't know if they're just being used as mules or their companies are involved in it. I mean, it's a worthy question for someone in journalism with more credentials than me.
Yeah. Okay. So let's pivot to your latest essay because it was a big one. I read it. Brother, you are so good. You're so good at with words, man. I feel like a fucking monkey when I read your shit. I have to take a break from writing for a couple of days because I'm sorry, brother. You use the way you string things together, and sorry for everybody watching this. I keep heaping praise on Gord, but you have to understand.
You're gonna make my wife jealous, dude. Come on.
Well, as a writer, you know this. You read other people's stuff, and 9 times out of 10, I read it and I go, okay, I would have structured it differently, or I would have. It's very rare that you encounter people that you're like, oh, this guy did it 1,000 times better than I could have ever dreamed.
I'm glad you said that because I feel like I rushed it and I didn't tie up a bunch of loose ends at the end of the piece for a couple of reasons. This is going to be some sort of writing inside baseball here, but sometimes you're under the gun with timing. I wanted to sort of jump on this H-1B thing here in the U.S. because it resonated so well with that. And also, I get annoyed with my editors at various places I write, like say Newsweek or the American Conservative Compact, wherever I write. They always want to compress things. They want to cut it out, make it shorter, make it more concise, which I get. Sometimes people check out. Sometimes it's better to be efficient with your words. And that essay was getting out of control, and it could have gone off on many tangents. And so I sort of had to mash it a little bit, and I don't think I mashed it very well. Anyways, so that essay I've been thinking about a lot because I spend a lot of time on when I'm not working, on trucking Twitter, what we call FreightX, and also people in real life. they'll send me stuff, or I'll get phone calls from people like, man, what's going on with the truck drivers? Or, hey, I got stuck in this crazy accident. Or my trucker friends will call me and say, oh yeah, Interstate 71 in Ohio is closed. There was this big wreck. Or, like, oh man, the 401's a mess again. Or my aunt will call me from Thunder Bay saying 17's closed again, another wreck out by Dryden. Like, I just keep hearing about this from people, and everybody knows that like something has gone terribly wrong with the trucking industry. And it's like almost a daily occurrence. So I started doing my homework, and I was like reading all these like online newspapers from like Northern Ontario. So like, some newspaper or CBC, or, someone from like Hearst or Long Lac or Timmins or whatever. And all of them have these pieces in them about people being concerned about all the truck accidents. And then I start digging around and looking for names. And then I have to measure that against what I'm hearing from my friends about like who the guilty parties are. And it's like, well, the guilty parties, this ties into other things that are happening with trucking. And I sort of wanted to make like an explainer about it, and also reach back to this problem we had at Humboldt, where this terrible tragedy took place. All these kids got killed, and it was because a truck driver, in air quotes, because I don't believe that guy deserved the title, blew a stop sign, hit this bus, and, drove a heart into the nation. And all of this is related, right? And it's related to a couple of different things. And because I've been a truck driver my entire life, I have seen how this stuff plays out myself. And I just wanted people to know, like, people need to have an explanation that's not just, oh, it's the friggin' Indians, or, oh, it's people who aren't trained, or, oh, it's this reason, or, oh, it's the weather, or, oh, it's the technology. It's all of those things. Mm-hmm. And they all have an origin, right? So in my writing specifically to the trucking industry, there's, I do a lot of research. I've talked to academics. I've got like 4 podcasts out with like various PhDs who've like done dissertations and written books on the trucking business, economists, sociologists, all that stuff. And a lot of what their research comes back to is the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, which was this piece of legislation signed by Jimmy Carter, who just passed away. That was another reason I tried to get it out the door, to ride the coattails of Carter's death, I think. But like, yeah, so this piece of legislation passes, and it basically opened the doors to the trucking industry to anybody. Prior to that, you had to apply for a license. You had to apply for authority to run certain lanes. You had to advertise your prices. This stuff could be scrutinized or challenged by other players in the market. It was a bit of a closed loop. Was that a problem for the economy? Yes. Was that a problem for prices to consumers? Yes. Was that a problem for truckers trying to start their own businesses that were good at it without having to like get bomped on the head by the Teamsters or some bigger company? Yes. But the way they went about deregulation was like they threw everything way out over in the opposite side. And what that did was fairly predictable by anyone that understands economics, is basically it created this hyper competition and a sort of race to the bottom. And a few years after Carter's passage of this, Canada does the same thing. And then we start hearing about this sort of meme called the truck driver shortage. And everyone's saying, oh, geez, there's not enough truck drivers around. Well, it turns out that's not really true, because what's happening is there's tons of truck drivers around and tons of people with CDLs, is they end up quitting because what they're getting paid keeps going down, but the work stays the same or gets worse. And then a nuance to the deregulation thing that I've come to sort of figure out over time is that they didn't deregulate the business as such, because you still have to regulate its operations. You still have to have concern for safety. You still have to sort of vet drivers. You have to vet equipment. You have to like inspect things. They just transferred all that. The phrase I use is they took regulation of the trucking industry from the C-suite to the driver's seat, right? Mm-hmm. So now drivers are being incredibly regulated. So they impose like electronic logbooks, and now trucking companies have these like, video cameras watching you. That's why you'll see videos online with like footage of the driver doing whatever before an accident, because those are becoming more and more of a thing. And pretty soon they're going to try and legislate that, and then it's really over. But Yeah, so we have these pressures on truckers. And so guys like me are just like, peace out, right? I haven't been on the road in 18 months.
Okay.
I got laid off from my last job. It's not because I quit. It's just like Biden inflation and the economy around here suck. And I've also got 2 little kids at home, so I'm not in a huge hurry to get back on the road. But, I've been doing this my entire life, right? Imagine taking anybody else that's been a professional and done the same thing for 25 years and then just keep packing more rules on them and say, actually, no, you know what? All of your experience doesn't matter anymore. We're putting a camera in your truck. We're going to put front collision avoidance technology on your truck that malfunctions and might cause you to jackknife. Doesn't matter. There's too many bad guys here, and we have to treat you the same as them. We have to pay you the same as them. Imagine, because this is another problem with the trucking business, is that because they've been talking about a driver shortage for so long, the industry is now cycling through people. They have a major retention and churn problem. Many people that get their licenses stay less than a year and quit. So what that does is it puts all this downward pressure on people's wages. And, again, studies have been done about this. The average truck driver's salary in the United States is 50% of what it once was in inflation-adjusted dollars in 1980, right? All the conditions are the same. You're still working 60, 70 hours a week, but you're getting harassed by the cops more, cameras in the truck, you get delayed everywhere you go. Nobody's ever fixed the delay and detention problem of trucks getting loaded or unloaded. Your job is actually way more dangerous now. Being a truck driver is like the 5th or 6th most dangerous occupation in the United States as far as risk of being killed or injured on the job goes because of all these accidents. And because of that, one of the things that the industry has done, they've gone through so many people and they've used so much taxpayer money to finance truck driving schools, and they still can't get people to sign up, is now what they're doing is they're abusing immigration programs to bring the third world here, which we might call insourcing. So, another thing this ties into is over the last 30, 40 years, especially under NAFTA, people's jobs have been shipped to Mexico, other countries, China, Vietnam, wherever. But you can't get rid of truck drivers. We're here. This is geography. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
So like many other jobs, they've decided that instead of, paying the local homeboys what they're worth, making sure their salaries keep up with inflation and that, the guys who've stuck with the business are afforded the respect and pay they deserve, just bring people here from India or Guatemala or El Salvador or wherever. Doesn't matter. Who cares? The freight's getting moved as cheap as we can make it move. All right. That functions a little differently in both Canada and the United States. Canada has got this temporary foreign worker program, these labor market impact assessment documents. There's all these different visas that get used and abused by various players in the business. And then in the United States, there's H-1B, H-2B, E-3B. There's all these different visa programs that are supposed to have, specific salary ranges and requirements, and it's only for specific industries. But what ends up happening is they get abused so much and there's so many people using them. The government has very little way to monitor it or enforce it. They're kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, incentivized not to. So in the wake of this H-1B kerfuffle that went online, the weaponized autists of the online sphere start digging through publicly available documents about the H-1B program and find out that the H-1B program is being used for nearly every occupation under the sun, including truck drivers. And that's over and above the H-2Bs, the E-3Bs. And the picture I'm painting here, I mean, if you haven't figured it out yet, is that truck drivers as a job and an occupation in North America have basically been waged war on economically by our own government, by these forces that would rather not pay us, by regulatory agencies, and by our own companies who are just caving to economic pressure rather than standing up and saying, no, we're going to offer you the industry and the economy legitimate, safe service with highly trained, well-paid drivers. They don't do that. Now they just say, well, we have electronic logbooks and cameras in the trucks. There, we're safe.
Yeah.
There's a transfer, like they don't trust people anymore because they're bringing in the wrong kind of people to do the job, and they're undermining the professionals that are good at it. And they're saying, well, trust all of this technology instead. What has the technology brought us? The technology has made things worse, just as the policies have made things worse. Front brake assist and lane control technology interrupts the driver's control of things and doesn't take into consideration the conditions on the road. I would submit that a lot of these accidents that are happening in places with bad weather, like, the Great Plains in the US or in the northern states or in Canada, yes, quite a bit of that's lack of experience and people brought here from countries where it doesn't snow, and lack of training. But it's also probably the technology. These new trucks will get spooked by something and hit the brakes automatically, and then you jackknife, and then you're in the ditch.
Yeah.
So, we're being attacked by the desire to not pay us, which manifests itself in the insourcing of third world labor very cheaply, and it's abusive to them as it's abusive to us. The imposition of technology as a Band-Aid over the lack of skill, because they don't want to pay for skilled, good people anymore. So those people just leave, right? They try and overregulate people. And so there's just this huge mess. And you see it in Humboldt. You see it up north on Highway 11 and 17 all the time. You see it in all these crashes in BC. I mean, this storm that just came through the Great Plains in the U.S. this weekend, there's been just nothing but footage of people getting in accidents and backups and stuff all over the place. And it's like, I hate to pick on people that just moved here again, but if you don't speak English and you're not paying attention to weather reports, I guess you don't know. And something I said in that essay, I'm going to criticize the government here. In 2016, before Trump came into power, the Obama administration, the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, issued this memorandum. It was done very quietly, and it was just by executive fiat. They just did it. There was no debate. There was no citizens getting to say no. They just waived the requirement that a commercial driver's license be issued to people who have the minimum understanding of English. To get a CDL in the United States, you're expected to speak English because you have to deal with cops, DOT officers, the motoring public. You have to be able to read signs, information signs. You have to, deal with your customers. It's a federal regulation that you must be able to communicate in English. The Obama administration just said, nope, they don't have to anymore. You're not allowed to enforce this. So there's part of the reason why, to my American listeners or your American listeners or people listening in Canada that might see an American truck, why is it why don't these people speak English, and why is it all these brown folks from all over the place? That's part of it. Canada does the same thing provincially. ICBC will give you an interpreter in order to fill out all your paperwork before you go get a Class 1. I mean, when you drive to Hope, BC along Highway 1, you leave Vancouver, you get to Hope, and there's all these electronic information signs telling you about all the mountain passes, whether or not you got to put tire chains on or they're closed. There's all this information. It's all in English.
Yeah.
Same in Ontario. Ontario's got all these electronic message boards on the 400 series highways, all in English, sometimes in French, and then you get into Quebec and it's French. Why are we issuing licenses to people in an extremely safety sensitive industry? We keep getting told, safety, safety, safety. We want everybody to be safe. We want to save lives. We don't want people getting in wrecks. Great. We all have to be able to communicate on the same page in a shared public space, being the road. The road is a shared public space that is owned by everybody, right? Yeah. And you can't just be on it and not be able to communicate in the lingua franca of that road. You might not like it, identity politics people, but that lingua franca in the United States is English. And in Canada, it's English or French, depending on what part of the country you're in. That's the rules. These guys have been waiving those rules in an effort to get more people into the trucking business so that they don't have to pay people what they're actually worth if they're experienced and they stick around. All of this is to continue the churn and to keep scraping the bottom of the human resources barrel to save guess who money.
Yeah. And look, for people listening, why is this important? Well, this is important because when you're driving a car, you're in control of a missile, a potential missile, right? When you're driving a truck, a big rig, that's like an atom bomb on the road, man. You can traumatize and end multiple lives all at once if you don't know what you're doing, right?
Very quickly.
And so, look, I'll say this, and again, it's difficult to talk about the immigration subject without sounding like, a white nationalist, supremacist, racist. But here's the truth. I almost get ran off the highway like 3-4 times a week by one of these fucking trucks. And every single time, I swear to God, I pull in front of that truck, I punch the gas and get around it. I look in my rear view and I'm fucking praying that it's somebody that I don't think I hope that it's somebody other than the person that I think it is. And every fucking time it's the same person. And, what you wrote alludes to a much bigger problem, right? And you are in a very unique position to explain that because you are a very eloquent, poetic writer, while at the same time understanding that industry inside and out. But what it alludes to is exactly what you just outlined 2 seconds ago. We are importing slave labor from around the world, thinking that if we band-aid shit like not being able to speak the language, if we put on brake assist and put cameras in the cab, I see these videos too. I follow you on X, brother. I see all the videos of guys driving off of bridges and in clipping fire trucks on the highway and stuff. All of this added technology doesn't change the fact that these people can't read road signs.
No, you cannot replace training, you cannot replace skill, you cannot replace competency in operating a piece of equipment with surveillance technology. It's like, how the saying goes, like, the cops just show up and fill out reports? They don't do anything about theft. They don't do anything if, like, someone breaks into your house or your car. They show up later, it's already over, and they take a report. That's what an electronic logging device does. That's what the surveillance cameras do. They're not preventing anything. Do we not want to prevent this stuff? Prevention requires training, and it requires competency, right? And unfortunately, certain complexes have gotten in the way of the streams and the bureaucracies which are supposed to guarantee that competency, right? And like, if someone's listening to this and they don't want to take it from me, don't. Go to one of the pieces I quoted in that essay. The Globe and Mail, Canada's biggest newspaper, did a deep dive into this in 2019, so 5 years ago. What I'm telling you mostly is old news, right? The Globe and Mail looked into this and they found that, like, there's this whole, there's a whole complex of these organizations in British Columbia especially who do nothing but take advantage of the work visas, take advantage of, like, how easy it is to get a license from ICBC, and then put these people on the road. And almost all of it's controlled by Indians. I'm sorry to say that that's per the Globe and Mail investigation, right? So you have one Indian gentleman that'll own a trucking company, and then one of his associates or his cousin or his brother is tied up with a immigration or a visa consulting agency that helps these people immigrate here. And then they've got somebody on the inside at ICBC that can guarantee that they get their license. And then they have a recruiter in India, and the recruiters are on the take too. And this isn't even just in trucking. Like, this has been revealed with the TFW program and the student visas. There's all these Indo-Canadian guys running around India promising the world to these folks from India, hey, come move to Canada, give me 30 grand, I will make sure we get you a visa, show up in Canada, you go to this, dodgy school, or you go work for my cousin that owns a Burger King or whatever in Ontario, and then we'll get you your work visa and you'll be guaranteed your new life in Canada with like no consideration for whether or not any of that's true, what their job's going to be when they get to Canada, where they're going to live. Like half the drivers they interviewed in this Globe and Mail piece said, we didn't know we were coming here to drive trucks. We just thought we were moving to Canada and getting some kind of a job, or they came here. Like the guy that, that was involved in that Humboldt incident, he originally got to Canada on a student visa, right? Yeah. None of these people are truck drivers, right? Like they did not start in India as truck drivers. They came to Canada and that was the easiest thing for them to get into. So now there's an entire cottage industry built around filtering those people into a business that, should require an awful lot more experience if we are going to be serious about safety and about making sure our roads don't turn into death traps. Right?
Yeah, completely. And I just want to add this here. So for people listening, the majority of our audience is American. And so I kind of have to.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's crazy, dude. That's a whole other conversation. The thing that drives me nuts about doing this podcast and just Canadian apathy in general is that, like, I want to say 60% of the politics that are discussed on this podcast are Justin Trudeau and Liberals and Canadian politics. Yet 60% of my listeners are in the United States. Like Canadians, for whatever reason, we just don't plug into the people who are sending the message. It's like you have to go around them, Anyways, point is for people listening, I was speaking to an Indian woman in my community who has been in Canada as a Canadian citizen for over 30 years, right? And she was breaking down how this whole system works. And Gord, you just laid it out perfectly. And we have these immigration consultancies popping up all over the northeast of Calgary, which is majority Punjabi, right? And here in my little town where I live, we have those same immigration consultancies popping up everywhere, which are just designed to bring in as many people as possible. They do not give a fuck about what the person's background is, what their work experience is, what their skill level is. It's just dollars and cents. Bring in as many people as you can, suck in as many dollars as you can. It's a legal form of the coyotes operating in Mexico, bringing people across the US southern border.
That's a great way of putting it.
Right. And so what she was saying to me, and for people listening, there's a reason why an overwhelming majority of Latinos in the United States voted for Donald Trump. You know why that is? Because when you go through the processes to legally immigrate somewhere, it is a long, fucking arduous process. There are hoops you have to jump through. There's paperwork you have to file. I've
done it. I immigrated to the United States because my wife is American, and even coming on a family visa, like even being sponsored by my wife, thousands of dollars in lawyer and legal fees and paperwork and back and forth with the government, and then they lost our stuff. It took us almost 18 months to do that correctly. And I lost count to how many thousands of dollars we spent. And I wasn't doing it to come here and get a job. I've done nothing but lose money. If you work in the oil patch in Alberta, you're making more than what 97% of truck drivers in the US make, even when you account for the difference in pay, difference in exchange. I lost money moving here. I didn't move here as an economic migrant. I moved here because of my family.
Right.
And it still cost me an arm and a leg. And to do it legally, it's a thing, man.
It really is. And it's difficult. You cannot get in trouble at all. You can't even get a speeding ticket. You can't, the process. And so what this lady and a number of other immigrants in my community have voiced to me is the anger in seeing these people coming through on fraudulent paperwork, because that's what these consultancies and the recruiters on the other side specialize in, is defrauding the system. So you have people who are coming through on student visas who are not students, right? But they know how to game the system. So they're gaming the system, and it becomes this massive funnel of just bringing in whoever from wherever, whenever, for whatever reason. And the result is 18-wheelers running over Toyota Camrys on the road. because these people did not come here specifically to be a truck driver, have no experience in that industry whatsoever, and now are put behind the wheel of an 8-ton vehicle. 80-ton vehicle. Sorry, 80-ton vehicle. Right? You're talking about an atomic bomb on the road.
Yeah, no, it's really unfortunate. And like, you know, you talk to any trucker that's been in the business a long time. You know, I know lots of guys that have been in it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years longer than I have. And they will all tell you it's a lifestyle. It's not a job, because it requires you to be away from home all the time unless you're like a local guy. But even if you're a local guy, most truckers work somewhere between like 50 and 80 hours a week, right? Like there's this whole 80-hour work week meme that's been going around with the H-1B discussion and all these tech bros expecting people to like work their butts off. And I'm like, well, for most people, it's two stories. A lot of employers in the United States that are doing things legally, they don't want you to work 80 hours a week. That means they have to pay you an additional 40 of overtime. They don't want to pay overtime. They're cheap. A lot of employers don't even want to give you benefits, and they want to like keep you under the 35-hour a week threshold where they have to give you benefits, or 32, depends on the state. But at the other end of that discussion is actually there's a lot of people in our society who do consistently work 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. Mm-hmm. And most of those people are truckers, right? So like you expect like some random person from like India or Central America to show up here and accept that as a standard, right? One of the sort of, if you talk to like dissident type people, they're always complaining about, you know, there's not enough family and we're not holding on to our culture. And, you know, sure, like I can accept those arguments, but like a lot of people from other countries are actually more traditional than we are. You know, Latin Americans and people from Central and South America are very Catholic and they're very family oriented. You know, same with Indians, you know, they have their gurdwaras and they're all very family-oriented people. Take those guys and tell them, sorry, you're going on the road for a couple of weeks. Like, do you think they like it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, what I'm seeing just firsthand experience is that there are a lot of people who did come here for the right reasons now, with, you know, proper paperwork and receiving their student visas, who did come to Canada, who pay 3 to 4 times what a Canadian pays for an education here. That's another scam, though, that we don't have time to go into, who are now working at Walmart, Tim Hortons, Burger King, McDonald's, and not in the field in which they were educated, which most people in Alberta here were educated as engineers, because all of the engineering jobs are gone. And a large portion of those jobs are gone to people who came here on fraudulent paperwork, right? So you have people who are engineering. Now, engineers who aren't actually engineers, who maybe have some sort of idea of what they're doing, but aren't the best of the best. And that, see, I wrote something on X. I agreed with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy's statements on the H-1B visa in terms of importing engineers, the top 0.00001%. But what I wrote underneath was, however, this system is often frequently abused. And that's how we end up with a whole lot of people who don't serve any real use or purpose to the country that they're immigrating to. And if that sounds crass or cold, just imagine me going to India to work at a grocery store. It doesn't make any fucking sense.
I did a tweet about this once. There was a incident a few weeks ago where 2 Indian gentlemen driving big trucks got into a head-on collision. And, you know, both of them dead. They had passengers in the vehicles. So 4 dead people, 2 wrecked trucks, big fire. And I asked this rhetorical question because I already know what the answer is, but like it serves to illustrate your very point. Find me an article from an Indian newspaper or website, most of them are in English, right? Where it's a white guy in a plaid flannel jacket who showed up in India not as a truck driver, trained as a truck driver while he was in India, and then rolled a truck over or got in an accident in India. Please find me that article. I'll give you $100. Find me that article. And nothing, because it doesn't exist. Yeah. All of this is in one direction, right? This is one of the reasons that people get so upset about this. And I think like guys like Ramaswamy and Musk, who serve a particular purpose, but like they're completely oblivious to the rest of it, is that like there's nowhere else to go. Like Canada and the United States, maybe the rest of the West in general, like this is it. Like everyone's moving here. If you're a working class person at the sort of bottom of the wage scale in one of these countries, there is nowhere for you to go to improve your lot in life. This is it. We're at the top here, right? So if we start getting all of these people that are moving here and they're depressing everybody's wage floor at the same time as inflation and cost of living has been going through the roof. And remember, like everything's been like bananas since COVID, and it was bananas before that. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Cost of purchasing property, cost of buying land, cost of cars, cost of insurance, everything is going through the roof. What's not going up? Your wages, right? Because wage floors are determined by the amount of available labor. And if we keep increasing that amount, the law of supply and demand says the price of that labor is only going to go one way. It's going to go down. There's nowhere for us to go. I can't move to India and like improve my lot in life.
Yeah.
I can't move to there's nowhere. That's it. We're here. This is it. So like people have to start thinking about like, what about the working class of Canada and the United States, right? Like, this is why Bernie Sanders tweeted that thing. He finally found his balls again after, cucking himself to the Democrats and all his supporters, like, suffering from Stockholm syndrome for the last 3 elections. Like, Jesus Christ. Glad you finally figured it out, Mr. Sanders. But, like, seriously, though, and I talked with this other guy named James Year. He's been a guest on my podcast a bunch, Voice of Gord. Go look it up, check it out. And we discuss the implementation of autonomous truck technology where there's not going to be any drivers. This is something that's been like a thing for the last few years. They're developing it. They're trying to get it out. This one company said they were going to have their trucks on the road fully driverless by the end of 2024. They didn't make that mark. This industry is having some hiccups in the progress of its products, but whatever. The bigger point that James has made to me a few times is, like, you think politics is bananas now? If you are a person that doesn't like Trump or Trumpism or populism or like rednecks that are demanding a pay increase in some respect, what's going to happen when you make 3 million American truck drivers unemployed?
Yeah.
Right? In 29 states, that's the number one job title for men. Truck driver. 29 states. What is it going to do to American politics when the elitist fucking scumbags who run our countries just say, flip the switch, that's it, you're all unemployed? People keep saying, well, every time there's an industrial revolution, new jobs are created. This one's different. That Andrew Yang guy that ran in 2020, he's a pretty smart fella. You might not like his politics or agree with all of his policies, but he was right about this. He went on the Rogan podcast and, made famous this term, the fourth industrial revolution. Okay. And he was correct about this. He's like, this industrial revolution is not going to be like any others because it's coming for everybody. If you're a coder, if you do design, if you do knowledge economy work, like those guys are all getting knocked out before truckers. And then eventually they come for truckers and other, like we're talking millions and millions and millions of people at the same time as our governments are importing millions and millions and millions of people here from other countries. Yeah. Where are we all going to work and find meaning in our lives or money to feed our kids, right? Like, never mind my narrow concerns as a truck driver or the concerns of like the motoring public, right? What are we going to do when all these people are unemployed? Like, nobody's thinking long-term about any of this stuff. All they're thinking about is short-term profit, right? So short-term profit means we don't make the necessary reforms to the licensing system to prevent untrained, illiterate people from getting behind the wheels of big trucks. Yeah. That's all I'm saying. You might want to like say deport them, send them all back, whatever. I'm going to set that aside and say specifically for trucking, we can stop this by increasing the standards by which people get licenses. Enforce the laws that are on the books. Trump, first day in office, he should say that FMC memorandum is null and void. If you can't speak English, your CDL is done, you're out of a job. Go learn English, get your license back, and come and join us. But until such time, you don't get to just waltz into the United States and drive truck if you can't speak English.
Yeah.
That would instantly solve a lot of that problem here in the U.S. And then Canada, I don't know if Poilievre is going to do it, because I've seen videos where Poilievre believes the truck driver shortage narrative too. He believes that there's like, oh, we need tons of truck drivers. No, we don't. Yeah. There's 3 times as many people with a license already as there are jobs for them. It's bullshit. Stop saying it. But Poilievre is a politician, and he's pandering to the Indian community, right? Yeah. I don't know if anyone's going to do anything about this. And I mean, look how insane British Columbia is, right? BC just returned this NDP fucking douchebag back to run their province, who's drove the place into the shitter. Everybody's on drugs, tent cities all over the place. They're trying to kill the business. Like, look what they're doing to Chase Barber, trying to develop this new technology that could be like a $1 billion industry headquartered in BC, and they're fighting him every step of the way. Like, the government of British Columbia are fucking idiots.
They're the most upside down backwards people.
Are they going to do anything about the fact that ICBC will just let anybody do their licensing in whatever language they want for no consideration of the fact that that license then lets them drive all over North America, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, if Trump wanted to do something to help America out, never mind your tariffs, just tell Canada, hey, guess what? We're not recognizing your guys' CDLs anymore. You guys aren't doing anything about the English language requirements, so fuck you. Your truck drivers can stay home. You know? We'll be all hauled in American trucks now.
Yeah. You know what's funny is I was just going to say, Gord, I know... how do we fix this? And then you just gave the answer.
Well, no, it's real simple. Like, just, you know, enforce laws that are on the books and go and do something about these immigration scams. You know, that Globe and Mail piece, you know, they basically outlined a system of indentured servitude, right? Like, lots of, you know, let's speak in the language of our liberal and progressive friends. They are constantly going on about human trafficking and making sure that, like, we treat the oppressed people of the world correctly. And you know what? For the most part, I agree with that. I don't think anybody should be treated poorly, or anybody should be, like, made to do something they don't want to do. Guess what? Their own homeboys have executed a system of indentured servitude where they have these recruiters in India. They find these folks there, bring them to Canada, and then make, you know, hey, we got you your visa. Go work for this trucking company. Go to this truck driving school. Mm-hmm. And guess who holds the visa? The same people. Oh, you're quitting? Oh, well, too bad for you. I guess you're going back to India now, and we're keeping the $30,000 you paid us to get here. Yeah. Right? Like, you know, maybe that doesn't fit the, you know, very dictionary definition of indentured servitude, but boy, doesn't that rhyme?
Yeah.
You know, let's knock all of that. Let's all nip that stuff in the bud. You know, like the solutions are right in front of us. It just takes like the political will to do it. And another group of people who are, I'm going to come to criticize here, who are get in the way of this is corporate lobby groups, right? You need to take the Canadian Trucking Alliance and you need to tell them to fuck off. Donald Trump needs, and every American politician needs to take the American Trucking Association and tell them to get bent too. Because guess what? Those guys are very happy about all of this stuff to remain the status quo. Because as long as there's a steady supply of cheap labor, they can continue paying shit and then pocket the profits, right? They can get the government. And a thing that happens in the United States a lot is there's a system of corporate welfare where they come to the government and say, oh, we can't find truck drivers. There's not enough truck drivers, even though there's fucking near 10 million of them. They just don't want to pay for the good ones. And what do American politicians do? Oh, we're going to give these guys money. It's a jobs program. We're helping somebody get a job. Well, there's no consideration about what that job pays, why we keep going through these people. Like, there's 450,000 new CDLs produced every single year in the United States of America. There's only like 2 million long-haul trucking positions, maybe not even that much. And then local drivers and other jobs that require CDLs, it ends up being 3 and change. But like, nobody asks, where do these people go? Is this good value for our money? Nope. As soon as you say the magic word, job, everyone turns their brains off and nobody cares where the money goes, right? Like, that shit's got to stop.
Fuck, Gord. God damn it, man. I chased you for months and you delivered, my brother.
Well, I'm a fan of driving slow, so it was easy for you to catch up to me.
Oh, like, dude. Yeah. God damn, man. I mean, there's just there's so much here. I wish we had like 5 hours to dissect this.
I can always come back.
Yeah, in 6 months after fucking multiple emails.
No, it's going to be easier for me to make time here. So, a little announcement for anybody that wants to help me out and make it easier for me to get back on your show. I've been approached by a new publisher in the United States to write a book about all this. So,
dude,
in addition to Trudeau finally resigning today, I just signed the contract. So I'm going to be writing a book, which means several months where I'll be at home trying to make a book out of all the things we just talked about and more. So I could probably jump back on a Zoom here, no problem.
Dude, okay, first of all, dude, congratulations, man. And congratulate, I hate saying that word because it sounds so empty. But, okay, for listeners, getting a book deal as a writer is a huge fucking deal. Dude, that is amazing.
I didn't even ask for it. Some guy showed up in my inbox like 2 months ago and started asking me about it out of nowhere. I got headhunted, I guess.
Dude, yes. Can I have you back in a couple of weeks? I'll reach out in a couple of weeks and we'll do this again.
Sure.
Yeah, dude, I can think of nobody more deserving of a book deal than you. Brother, I honestly feel like you're one of those guys that, like
I'm just a dude, man.
I know, but I read your
opinion merchant.
Dude, so am I. But I read your shit and I'm just like, God damn, man. Like, I just believe in giving people their credit where it's due. And brother, you deserve all of this, man. And I am so happy that you got that deal. And
I want to give you credit for all the interviews with Sam Cooper and all these other people, like actually digging into what's going on.
Yeah.
So someone's got to be paying attention because, like I said, from the Freedom Convoy and all that, like nobody in Canada is telling the truth about anything.
Well,
everyone's like playing the stupid politics game or trying to be an influencer. Like, what is actually going on? Like, you need real investigative journalism, like my friend Trish Wood from, used to be on the CBC. Like, she was it, she was the co-host of the Canadian version of 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
And, there's barely anybody doing deep dive investigative journalism anymore. Guys like Sam Cooper and gentlemen like yourself that interview him and give him a platform. Like, good for you.
Thanks, brother. And, hats off to Trish. A little behind the scenes stuff. Trish was the one who talked me out of stopping doing this. So Trish called me and gave me an hour-long pep talk. And the reason I'm still doing this is because of her.
Thanks, Trish.
Yeah, because, well, the thing that frustrates me is, and you just illustrated it perfectly, this whole environment, this whole political discussion is crowded with people who want to be influencers and celebrities and public figures.
God, it's just noise.
Yeah, and people who just pump out garbage and actual misinformation onto X and other platforms in the pursuit of ad dollars, right? Like, you can actually, and I've done this before, by fucking with the algorithm and by pushing stuff out there that may be a little bit more speculative in nature. If they see that it's getting a lot of traction, they'll follow your lead into the abyss. And I love fucking with those people because you can watch them do it. And someday I'm going to start naming some names because I'm getting really angry and upset because at times I know it's hard for people out there listening. I know it's hard to find sources of truth and sources of real information because so much of it is rooted in a political bias or an allegiance to a political cult nowadays. And that's what Brave New Normal is. That's why I have these discussions, because I want to be a voice for integrity. And the people that I bring on and I have these discussions with, I'm doing it specifically because I know these people have integrity as well. And Gord, you're the reason I've fucking chased you for like 6 months is because you're one of those guys, right? And,
Thanks.
I'm not somebody who looks up to people. I don't generally look up to a lot of people because I have my own life. I'm a man in his 40s. I'm already on my path. But you're one of those people that I look up to as a writer and as a thinker and as a speaker because of the way you so eloquently articulate yourself all the fucking time. And you wrap it in your blue collar, Gord Magill style, which is beautiful. I love it because it brings it down to the layman so that they can understand it as well. And so I'm taking the long way around, but really what I'm trying to say is that I'm just trying to cut through the noise, cut through the static, and bring real information to the world because I'm fucking freaking out. You know what I mean? Like, I'm freaking out just like everybody else. I just don't know how to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, well, you and I both have kids.
Yes.
And we have a world to leave for them and a society hopefully intact for them. And I quite like trucking. Trucking's been very good to me. You know, yeah. I went hauled logs in New Zealand. I drove road trains in Australia. I've been up on the ice. I spent 10 years in Alberta. I've seen every corner of North America. I had a good time, made a couple bucks here and there. And I want other people to be able to have that good time. And I want them to not have to make the judgment that, like, am I risking my life being on the road? Am I going to, do I have to accept these, terrible pay and conditions and nothing ever getting fixed? Because the trucking industry's got lots of problems and they're never going to get solved if the solution is just keep throwing more people at it constantly, right? That's why I do what I do. Like on the whole influencer thing, like I've got 6,000 followers on Twitter now. I don't know where most of them came from. I have no idea. I bought a blue check so that I could amplify the Coots Guys fundraiser. And I've made $0 on Twitter. Like, people are like, oh, look, I made $300 tweeting this pay period or whatever. I'm like, I've got zero. Thanks, Elon.
Yeah.
My podcast has generated $0 because I don't charge for it.
Listen, you're one of those people that should be 300, 400,000. And look, I look, man, I know I'm sucking your dick to death on this podcast, but I admire what you do so much, man. And people listening, Gord is one of those rare guys where he's not doing shit to be popular. He's not doing shit to be an influencer. Everything Gord's done, and I know the stuff that you don't even talk about that you've done behind the scenes, especially with the Coots Guys. And I do want to talk about that the next time you and I speak.
Right.
Gord doesn't do stuff because there's something in it for him. And that's a very rare quality in people nowadays. Gord does stuff because of his moral compass and that he's following and things that he believes is right. And so people out there, Gord, where can they find you on X?
So on Twitter, provided I don't get kicked off again, at Gord Magill. Most of my writing is available at Substack, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. If you want to chip in some money for the ongoing legal, outstanding legal bills for Tony Oleanick and Chris Carbert, givesendgo.com/Trudeau's political prisoners. I have a little podcast I do that's mostly about trucking. It's called Voice of Gord. The R is in parentheses. It's a little bit of a visual joke on all of your finer podcasting platforms. And you can find me on Brave New Normal. This is my second visit, and hopefully I'll be back sooner rather than later.
Dude, I will fly to fucking New York and find you. But listen, guys, follow Gord. There are a lot of accounts out there that are pumping a lot of fucking noise into the atmosphere. And I find myself becoming increasingly cynical because I find it hard to find a place and find the people who are really sharing actual information and real truth. And Gord is one of those rare people. So guys, follow Gord on X, GordMagill, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. Look, I get a lot of people reaching out to me saying, dude, I don't like to read, but I love to read your stuff, which is, to me, the biggest compliment when people reach out and say, dude, I've never read a book in my life, but I read all of your essays. If you like my writing, go and read autonomoustruckers.substack.com. Gord is me to a third power. And he's beyond me.
But only about two subjects.
Doesn't fucking matter because dude, I don't know shit about trucking, and I'm not going to lie. Prior to you, I had zero interest in it. But when I started reading your stuff, you made me interested in that world. And the things that you have to say are so well put together and so fucking fascinating that people, even if you're not into trucking, read autonomoustruckers.substack.com. I promise you won't be disappointed.
And if you stick around, bear with me until February 2026. The working title of my book is called End of the Road. Hopefully I'll have between 160 and 220 pages on this very topic for you all to digest. So,
all right, listen, as soon as that book is done, I want a copy. I want to read it cover to cover. I'll buy it. Like, I'm not asking for a free copy. Just send me the Amazon link. Don't send me a copy. And Gord, I want to have you back in a couple of weeks. I will fly to New York and find you.
Let's talk about the Coot stuff. There's lots going on there.
Yeah. So listen, we'll cut it here. But next episode, we're going to go into the Coot stuff. And then, of course, all of the wacky stuff in the world of Canadian and American politics. But for now, Gord, my brother, I mean everything that I say on this podcast. And as much as I kissed your ass and blew smoke and gave you a hand job, I really meant it. My brother, it is always an honor to talk to you. I'm so glad we made this happen again. And I look forward to doing it very, very soon.
I'm going away on a road trip with my brother-in-law for work purposes. So I'm going to be away from my wife for the next 3 nights. So thank you very much. Thank you for having me on. And as I like to end my podcast with, way the road.